Hey everybody, my name is Mitch Weathers. I'm the founder of Organized Binder, and I want you to think about this session in two ways. That if we're educating for careers, there's two really important things outside of the content of a course that might be um, something a student's engaged in that's specifically for a career pathway. So that content, of course, is important, and that's going to change depending on the course and depending on the pathway or the career. But two things that are foundational in those courses is one, students gaining exposure to skills and habits, those non-cognitive skills or executive functions, and then creating a portfolio of what they're learning that they take with them, because this information is so important and so directional in a way for a career or a job, that they want to have both evidence of their hard work and learning, but something they can take with them as a foundation to build upon on subsequent courses, but also even to utilize within the career. And so this is a pretty unique program that's content agnostic. Organized Binder can be embedded into any grade level. We work with K-12s as well as colleges, but it does just those two things. It creates really predictable learning environments. And by virtue of that routine in that predictable learning environment, students get practice with these executive functions. So what this is kind of built on, I'll show you a few quotes to start with. That if we're going to move into college and career readiness for all, we must now teach some skills formerly learned by students on their own. And that's a big thing, right? It's a big challenge if you already have content that you're trying so hard to teach, and usually we don't have time. So that's a big question. Where do we find the time to practice goal setting and practice reflective learning or metacognition or time and task management? All of these skills that research has shown directly impact both academic achievement as well as career success. And so this is a very interesting report on non-cognitive skills out of the University of Chicago, but that if we can help students develop those skills, strategies, attitudes, and behaviors that are the hallmark of effective learners, you're both going to improve course performance, which of course we all care about, but that students will be more likely to be successful in college and beyond. So really focusing in on those skills, but I want to go back to that time issue. We rarely have enough time to get through what we're trying to teach anyway in a course. And if we're really focused on career pathways and development, then what we're learning or teaching is critical. So we don't want to shortcut time. And so here's the difference with Organized Binder is you can give students daily exposure to these skills and habits by embedding them into the routine, that predictable routine I mentioned. So from Doug Lemov of Teach Like a Champion, consider one unmistakable driver of students' achievement: carefully built and practiced routines. And so what Organized Binder does is it creates a routine, a daily learning routine. And here's what's great. It works in a traditional classroom. It works in a hybrid schedule where you see students kind of part-time, another time they're home, or in a fully virtual distance learning scenario. Students can still have their Organized Binder and engage in this routine that's going to structure their learning, but also by virtue of that routine, practice all of these skills and create a portfolio of their learning. So that's what I hope you get your takeaways here. And I'm going to move fast. So if you have any questions or want to learn more, just reach out to me. But this is an Organized Binder. Each of those tabs is aligned to these aspects. And what I'm going to do, spend most of our time here, is look at how the program is used daily. And again, this could be in a classroom setting or somewhere in between, a fully remote distance learning scenario that we're in now with the pandemic. But if we were to look at the aspects of Organized Binder, and I'll blow these episodes a little bit bigger, we always start with something called the kickoff on the weekly lifeline. Then we transition to an agenda and the table of contents. This is just how we begin the school day or the class period or the learning session. On occasion, we might look at this toolkit that I'll talk about. And then at the end of class or the school day or the learning session, we go back to this weekly lifeline where we started with that kickoff, and we engage in something called a learning log. And both of those are really a reflective practice that I'll talk about here. So again, this could be during a student work session, or this could be in your class, whatever the structure is, online or in person. And the point I want to make here is that this program takes very little time out of your class period. The work with Organized Binder is done in the routine, kind of how the day functions or flows, leaving you time, and oftentimes educators say even more time, um, to teach the content of your class. Okay, so just keep in mind, it's those first few minutes and last few minutes of class, which historically are kind of the most underutilized class time. So if you were, let's just kind of talk about this if it was a class, and you walked into my classroom, again, whether virtual or in person, I would have this up for you, projected for you, so that you could see it as a nonverbal visual cue that, oh yeah, in order to be considered on time, I'm in my assigned seat with my organized binder open to this page. The weekly lifelines in that B tab, and there's 18 of these per semester. So if you're a college professor, you would have, of course, one for one semester. If you're in the K-12 space, there's a semester 2 refill packet. Everything you need for the entire school year or semester. And what we would do is students would see this, and before class begins or before you begin class, students would just simply find their seat, have their binder open to this page, kind of getting ready to go. And then when the bell rings or however you begin, you would show some type of prompt that would go here with this kickoff. Typically, how this is used is a chance to go back and revisit the key concept or objective or standard from the previous time I saw you, whether that's the previous class period, or if you're in a hybrid type of schedule, it could have been multiple days. And we need that, just coming back. It's not a quiz, it's simply a kickoff. Just like when you kick off a soccer game, that before you can have a kickoff though, there's a preparation. And when I was designing this, I shared that with my students. In the same way you prep for a soccer match, and you know, like, you got your gear on, you've warmed up, you know your position, the other team's doing the same thing, a refs come, and then there's a kickoff. And you need to be ready and know what it means to be ready when kickoff happens. Well, the same is true for learning. And if students don't have practice with that daily, figuring out what it looks like for them when they're ready to learn or engage, um, it's harder for them to do so. So it's simply this, okay, we're getting ready, and then we kick the learning session or we kick the class off, and we dive into this review. And what it does for me as the classroom teacher, and I'll show you some pictures here, is I get to revisit those concepts and standards. And research is really clear about this. The more explicit you are about your goals or objectives or standards for an individual lesson, the more likely students are to get them. So here I am, if this really was Monday, September 14th, what was the objective when I saw you on Friday or Thursday or Wednesday, whenever I saw you last? How crystal clear am I? Because if I don't know exactly what the point of my lesson was, students are less likely to be successful understanding that as well. And can I distill that down into a prompt that engages students the moment they walk in? And for them, it's like a safety net. They can get their questions answered. We can clear up misconceptions before we engage and move on. And in kind of sequential or linear classes, you can imagine how important this is, but it's true of any subject. Even previous classes, like the foundation for learning is often built before, whether that be the day before or the year before. So having that chance for retrieval practice is really important, and students do this every single day. So if you're engaged in this from the first part of the semester to the very end, you could have as many as 18 of these weekly lifelines, and that could be as many as 90 standards or objectives aligned prompts that students write down and respond to. So they're building this resource, and this is important, to learn to study from, because they may not know how they study best yet. So if we can develop resources by virtue of routine that solve all of these concerns about revisiting and clearing up misconceptions and building that foundation, by also creating something that's mine that I can look back on, can really move the needle for students. And as I said, that for me as a classroom-based teacher, I get this moment before we do anything to just make sure you got it. This is the thing I needed you to get before we move on. And for students, they're writing it down. And it's not a quiz. This is meant to be an engaging um, kickoff. We're going to start, okay? This kind of cognitive engagement. You can do this in a variety of ways. And for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over some of this. I want to just show you some examples. But I want to make the point, especially depending on the career pathway, if we're educating for careers, it may not have to all be written. I do a lot of diagramming with my students, but you can see this is the kickoff. Here's another kickoff where they're recording it. And I would draw your attention, you can see here on this screen here, the checkbox with the 5 there. When we finish this kickoff time, this beginning time, what most of us do as teachers would say, okay, now check yourself. And students simply write a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in that checkbox. And for them, it's that metacognitive. Where am I? 1, I'm completely lost. 5 is I got it. Where am I on that road to understanding or feeling like I got this concept? I've learned it. Because what it looks like for me to learn something is different than possibly everybody in the room. It's unique to me. And unless I get practice figuring that out, I may never understand it. So taking these little moments for cognition in class, not because you're doing anything other than engaging in class, because it's this routine, right? So the kickoff is this retrieval practice. And then I have to self-assess. Where am I? And do I got it? Okay, and so 1 through 5, 1, I'm lost, 5, I got it. And for me, as the instructor or the classroom teacher, um, it's all formative assessment. It's this authentic feedback. And I'm walking around. And if this were a training, I would show you some videos of this of the classroom base, and we can talk about it in a distributed or remote setting. And I'm just getting a snapshot of where all my students are. Okay. And I may have thought I gave the greatest lesson the Friday before or the Thursday before, and everyone that was present was going to be a 4 or 5, and everyone's a 1 or a 2. And they may not be willing to raise their hand and express that. Now, I need to mitigate that or work through that and resolve it, help students clear up those misconceptions before I can move on. And again, in these career pathways, these career courses, it's so important that we have these daily formative check-ins so that I can either pivot and adjust accordingly to help students be successful. So some more kickoffs. They all end up back in here in their organized binder behind that B tab. And that's typically how we start class. And then we would transition to this agenda and table of contents. But since we begin and end class on this weekly lifeline, I'm just going to jump to the end of class or the end of the learning period, whatever your scenario, or school day, and just talk about how we end. Okay. In the same way that we start with that reflection, and I'm crafting these prompts that gets at these objectives or standards from the last time we saw, there's a similar prompting and self-reflection happening at the end of the class. Okay. And that's the learning log. And what students are doing is they're reflecting on that day's work. The kickoff is the previous day. So there's always this kind of going back to thinking through what I'm learning by virtue of organized binder routine. And it's all about the prompts. And so what I want to say here is that when students are writing, it's this one-on-one personal conversation with you about what they're learning or what they may be confused by. And we have a guide for educators, we have a guide for parents, we pride ourselves on our training as an organization, but really on our support. And so the quality of the prompting, or I should say the quality of the student feedback, the depth, which is all formative assessment, is predicated on the quality of the prompting. And so we have pages of sample prompts that may be content specific, it may be interpersonal. There's some things that you can do with this that are really profound. But what it does now is the beginning and end of class, a traditional class, which is some of the most underutilized class time, like I said, is now, I like to say, exploited for learning. We're using every spare moment. And not only are you getting all this formative feedback and the chance to reteach, it's this practice with the skills that, again, that research has shown helps students be more successful. So I'll draw your attention to this last sentence here. Elaboration is the process of giving new material meaning. So this is the learning log, that end of classing. New material, stuff I'm learning today. Expressing it in your own words and connecting it with what you already know. That's not easily done. But if we practice it every day or every chance we meet, students will get better at it. It's these moments of cognition that, and this is important for careers here, that liberating education consists in acts of cognition, not transfers of information. And we have to be careful because in a career pathway course, I have stuff I need to teach you. And I want you to know, and I want you to take it, I want you to have it in your portfolio so you can be successful. But as the classroom educator or the professor of the course, if I don't give you moments to process these moments of cognition, I'm doing a disservice, but I can get there if I just implement this program. And it's all about getting the information out. This is a great read. Based on a century of research, in order to transform learning, we must focus on getting information out, a strategy called retrieval practice. And we spend as educators so much time getting information in, which is also part of the job, don't get me wrong. But if we don't pause and and it may even not even be accurate. That's not the point here. These kickoff and learning log responses, it's about retrieval practice and pulling it out. One of the caveats with organized binders, you're using academic English. So all of your learning logs, all of your kickoffs, you're practicing grammatically correct, complete sentences in English. And then to touch on Marzano's work, it's all about exposures. And I like to, he said teachers should find ways to expose students to details multiple times, at least 3, ideally no more than 2 days apart. And so if you are in a traditional schedule where you see students every day, whether online or in person, with Organized Binder, you give the lesson that you normally given. None of that changes, okay? So not altering the way you teach, but then at the end of class, now we have a learning log, 2nd exposure. If you give any practice for homework, 3rd exposure. And then when you come back to me 24 hours later, the first thing we do, the moment we begin, guess what? We go back. It's another exposure. So it's actually 4 exposures every 24 hours. And all you're doing is just teaching. It's, again, just based on the routine. And just based on that routine and these exposures, students are more likely to retain what they're learning. So we begin and end with retrieval practice, but then you got to make a plan for the day. So we're going to go back to the beginning. We've done the kickoff. You've checked yourself, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then we quickly turn to the agenda. And this is a way for me to introduce, here's what's coming at you. Again, predictability. I'm going to be covering this in class. You're going to have this for homework. But the real point of this is to teach students or to model for students the skill of maintaining a calendar. And so what we would ask you to do if this were a training is look at your syllabus and figure out some of the larger, kind of more important or weightier assignments or assessments coming up and put them on the calendar just in 2 and 3 week increments. Don't put it out 15 weeks from now like you might and just expect students to be ready to go. Let's teach them and model for them that skill. So I might say as a science teacher, hey, we have this big lab report that's going to be due next Friday. Here we are on the 14th, and we're going to do this cardio lab during this week, but your report's not due till next Friday, but it's so important. Let's write it on our calendar because that's what people do who keep a calendar. And I'll tell you what, I won't give you any homework the night before, so I want you to finalize your report before you share it with me and turn it in, and then I move on. And the next day, kickoff, check yourself, update the agenda. Wednesday, Thursday, it's the same routine every single day. Now, at the very least, students no one's going to not know that report's due, but at the very most is they're going to start developing this skill, right? Where I have to write things down. So I know they're coming. I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to execute, which by the way, the colleges we work with say that's the most important skill that hinders new college students. And that could be returning. It could be adults that have never gone to college or those right out of high school, all in between. And I'm new to this, it's the time management aspect. So we work in class or in a class instruction to model this and then provide a planner for students so they're doing it in all of their classes. And it really starts to make concrete this vital skill. And that's just a moment, right? So we've done the kickoff, check yourself. That might take a little bit more time depending on the depth of the review. We've made the plan and then we have to get organized, just like this name references. And then we turn to this table of contents. That's in tab G. Again, all of these have multiples. And think of this as a cover sheet. And each day we just write down on our table of contents anything that I'm going to create or that's going to be shared with me, given to me, or taken out of a consumable. Anything that's content for this unit. So G1 would be the first unit of the year. And if you just follow that date column, we would just do this every day. On each of these days, I've done the kickoff. I've quickly updated the table of contents, or I quickly update the agenda. We turn to the table of contents, and then you teach. Next day, kickoff, quickly update the agenda, table of contents, you teach. It's just those first few minutes in class. And what students are doing, if I could draw your attention to the number column, they're recording the date. Anytime something has a point value, it doesn't have to. This is all just work and materials that are for this unit. That's the lens here. Point value doesn't matter. Type of assignment doesn't matter. If it's notes, there's no notes section. Those notes belong with this content, especially in a career pathway. Like all of this really needs to be together, and you've worked hard to sequence it. So let's capture that unit lesson planning, just like this system helps structure a daily lesson plan. So students are keeping track of their scores, so they're intimately aware of how they're doing in the class. They know that the effort they put in translates into their score, which can be missed in an online gradebook. Of course, that's still happening. But all students do, if you'd watch this, look at that number 5, they just write the assignment number in the upper right-hand corner. And again, it could be line paper. Each semester packet with organized binder comes with 50 pieces of binder paper. It's an equity statement, like here's everything you need for the school year or the semester. Or it could be something that I've photocopied or something I've downloaded and printed, something I've taken out of consumable. It doesn't really matter. And we can even talk through how you do this in a digital application, or more importantly, a blended, where you have some stuff paper, pencil, some stuff online. Super easy. But that number goes in the upper right-hand corner so that this table of contents becomes really just a cover sheet. And I can flip behind, or more importantly, a student or a parent could flip behind that G1, and they would see number 1, number 2, number 3, so that when I get to the end of my unit, this unit 1, I staple this together with all the work and I create a unit packet. And this is the portfolio aspect that's so important for career pathways. So remember, I'll take you back. Develop skills, create that portfolio. They need these if they're going to be successful in whatever career they've chosen. And here's 2 students studying for a final in June with everything they've done from the first day of school in August to June, neatly chunked in thematic unit packets that go back into their binder, okay, that they, of course, can use to study from. They go back in the binder. There's a tab that says completed unit packets. So let's say there was 15 units in your course. They would have 15 unit packets. Everything from the entire course goes in their binder. And we've stopped calling it a portfolio because it's a trophy for students. They are so emphatic about their organized binder or portfolio or trophy at the end of the school year. And again, you're not doing anything but following a routine. It's very simple. Now, on occasion, so most class periods, it's kickoff, quickly update the agenda and get organized, and then you teach, okay? At the end, learning log. Every once in a while, though, you want to reference a toolkit, because we got to build tools. And these are things that are not unit-specific work, and it's important for students to make that differentiation, that distinction between, like, this is specific to the unit we're working on, and you might have multiple units going on at the same time concurrently. That's fine. But there's also resources and tools that are for all units, or for the whole course. And there's many of these in a career-focused course that are vital for students. And they need to separate them or have that distinction. So this is kind of their toolkit, if you will. And if as a science teacher, of course, the scientific method, I'm going to lecture on that the first week of school. But we're going to reference that all school year when we're setting up a hypothesis. So I don't want it trapped in one of those unit packets. Or it could be conversions, lab reports, it's any of these resources. This becomes a really important document. So again, kickoff, agenda, table of contents, and in most days, teach. First few minutes. Into class with the learning log. Sometimes you reference the toolkit, and then we end with this reflection. Okay. One of the things, and I will stop and pause on this, that, when students don't have a predictable routine, it can bring up certainly uncertainty. And if you're going from class to class to class, if you're in that type of scenario, again, online or in person, that can be amplified. And there's certainly enough anxiety in the world right now that put those two together, and it equals fear. And students don't learn out of a place of fear. So we really want to make it predictable, because predictable learning environments are safer. Now, I'm going to not spend too much time on this just because we'll run out of time here, but just want you to know that there's a quarterly goal setting or periodic goal setting, which is so important. And we spend so little time doing that in academia. So we would always start every marking period or term or quarter, however you're structured, setting goals. But here's the point. It's not so much about the goal. We're going to work through kind of like SMART goals, if you've heard of them, but really simplified. And we're trying to get to this daily task. If students can identify, what do I need to do today to accomplish my goal in 8 weeks from now? Maybe not at the end of the semester or the end of the school year. We're going to chunk it. And we're going to make it very specific to me being successful in this course, which may look different from another course depending on what I'm learning. Okay, really critical. We could spend a lot of time there, and we will in a training. There's always a binder check. We got to check for organization. Everything in organized binder has a place where it lives. This is not uncommon when we visit schools and colleges. This is actually from a college classroom. English comp binder is underneath. That top binder is for all of the students' other classes. You're just less likely to be successful if you're not organized, and not just organized for the sake of being organized, but practicing these organizational skills every day based on the virtue of the routine. Okay. The other two aspects, there's a spot for your syllabus, which is really important in a career focused course. That's tab E. And then the passes are optional based on really K-12 versus college. And we could talk about that. So again, students walk with this portfolio. They get daily practice with these skills that are not taking away from your class time, but embedded into the routine of the class. This is where your syllabus would be. And I'll end with DWEC, like I always do, simply raising standards in our schools without giving students the means of reaching them. It's just a recipe for disaster. It pushes the poorly prepared or poorly motivated students into failure and out of school. And as students try to find a career, we want to engage them and build them up and not only develop these non-cognitive skills or executive functions, but let them have that trophy that they're going to use in subsequent classes. So thanks for joining me. This is me. Feel free to reach out. I appreciate you taking some time with me.